All right, good Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for hopping on NCSA Live. I'm Senior Recruiting Manager David Kamisic here at Next College Student Athlete, joined by Kyle Winters, one of our recruiting managers. Kyle, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I still work for Next College Student Athlete. I know you moved on to Next College Athlete, but I haven't quite gotten to that point just yet.
You know, I'm really breaking down the acronym even shorter.
It's all about efficiency. It's all about efficiency.
I'm trying to get to today's topic. We got a great topic. So we appreciate you guys tuning in, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever social platform you're watching us on. Today, we're going to start off by talking about really how college coaches go about recruiting student athletes. Obviously, a huge piece of the recruiting process. So we want to make sure that you guys understand when the process begins, really what college coaches are looking for, and then I'll give you guys 5 steps that'll help you hopefully in the recruiting process. But we're going to focus on this topic to start, and then certainly encourage any questions to have coming in. So if you guys have any questions about this specific topic or anything in the recruiting process overall, drop a pin or a note there at the bottom, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. A first one, Kyle, this one is one that we hear all the time from families. I think it's one that oftentimes is probably misconstrued in a family's mind in terms of when the recruiting process begins. It doesn't just start junior year. It doesn't just start senior year. There's a long process behind that. So Kyle, why don't you start off by just talking about when does the recruiting process really begin for student athletes, for college coaches? Good starting point.
Yeah, it's a huge misconception that recruiting waits until a student athlete gets to their junior year, or gets to their senior year, or when they register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. We probably first have to take a step back and acknowledge that there is a recruiting process. It's not like high school sports. It's not where you just go to the school and you try out for the team. Very rarely are student athletes able to go to a university or go to a college and just try out for the team and join the team when they get there. So there is a recruiting process. When it starts, it's a kind of a difficult answer, but it starts early. It starts as early as freshman year. Some cases it starts as early as 7th and 8th grade. It starts long before college coaches ever start interacting with a specific student athlete. For most Division I schools, high-level programs, they start at a bare minimum identifying products or prospects a freshman year, in some cases a little bit younger than that, where they're just viewing their profile. They're checking out their highlight video. They're seeing where they're at this point. They're trying to get a baseline of where they're going to be looking at for like the 2026 class or the 2025 class right now. They want to build up a large recruiting list of student athletes that they can be using to narrow down over the next 3, 4, or 5 years worth of time. For student athletes, we definitely have to acknowledge that it starts whenever you start it. It starts when you start the recruiting process. You can start being proactive really anytime. There really aren't restrictions on student athletes and what you can be doing to get your information out in front of college coaches. So misconceptions, it starts junior, senior year, but really it starts pretty early, freshman year, some cases even earlier than that.
Even with our network, once you turn 13 years old, you're able to build a recruiting profile as a student athlete. So typically, the earlier you start the process, the better. The NCAA also does have in place a recruiting timeline that tells coaches when they can do certain things. So for Division III schools, for NAIA schools, for junior colleges, there's no restrictions, there's no limitations. It's really fair game throughout the recruiting process. But for Division I and Division II schools, they can send out pamphlets, they can send out questionnaires, generic letters, camp invites, really anytime the student athlete enters high school. And then they can't actually call a student athlete, until the summer, typically between their sophomore and junior year. But again, they're sending out information ahead of time, evaluating the athletes, identifying prospects. So it can really vary based on the college coach in the division level. Typically, the Division I schools are going to be much earlier with their identification and evaluation of athletes than D2s and D3s will follow after. But again, coaches, they're limited in terms of when and what they can do. So that sophomore, junior year, summer, when these coaches can start directly calling student athletes in most sports, it's not just all of a sudden these coaches are thinking, okay, well, I can start calling the 2025 class tomorrow, so let me start looking at some 2025 prospects. They're taking time to spend months and years, in some cases, building their recruiting list. So Kyle, let's talk a little bit about that. What are college coaches looking for when they're recruiting certain student athletes?
Yeah, it's really dependent. Every college, every team, every program, they're going to have different needs. They're going to have different positions they're looking for. They're going to have their current, enrolled student athletes seniors through freshmen that fill these certain positions. One year they may be really heavy with seniors, so they may be in need of a lot of different positions for that upcoming year. They may have other student athletes that are junior, sophomore, and freshman year that might be filling in some of those positions as well. So it's really going to be dependent on what those coaches need, whether it's a pitcher or they need a shortstop. They're looking for a really good catcher coming in. They have to really kind of vary their recruiting based along that. A lot of coaches talk about, for most sports, I'm looking for an athlete. I want an athlete that can fit into a lot of different positions and fill really a lot of the needs I'm looking for. That being said, they're still going to have their basic criteria that they're looking for as well. If we're talking about Alabama football and we're talking about their offensive line, they're probably going to be looking at student athletes who are 6'8", 7 feet tall, 350 pounds. They're looking at the biggest student athletes in the country versus looking at a small Division III program offensive line. Maybe they're still looking for kids who are 250 to 280 to 300, but they're maybe not going to get the same size. So it's really going to be dependent on that school, what they need, their preferences, what they feel like they can bring in when it comes to height, weight, position, grad year. Their academics is a big factor as well, their skill level, and just being realistic and what type of student athletes they can bring into the program.
Yeah, it also depends too on how much scholarship availability they have. Right, not every year a coach is going to have the same amount of scholarship money available to bring in new players, so that's going to vary. If they're only losing, 2 players off a basketball team, they're only looking to bring in 2 scholarship athletes. That's a lot different than the team that's losing 7 people and has to fill 7 spots. And I think one thing that's interesting with the recruiting process, it's not just these days recruiting kids out of high school, but you have so many transfers with the transfer portal. We got a question that we'll get to here in a little bit about that, but you look at junior college kids. So there's a lot of different variants that come with the recruiting process. Some coaches want to bring in young kids and develop talent. Others are looking to maybe bring in some transfers to add some experience to it. So again, each program, each coach can be a little bit different in what they're looking for. So it's hard to really give a blanketed answer, but overall, academic requirements, athletic ability, those are going to be some of the key ones that every college coach is looking for. Again, from there, it's just, all right, I want some athletes on my team. I want some shooters on my team. I'm looking for a power hitter. I'm looking for an average hitter, guy who can get on base. So again, each coach is going to be a little bit different with what they're looking for. And again, a lot of that varies based on the makeup of the kids they have returning to their team and what holes they're trying to fill or what complements they're trying to have there as well. So, but we have 5 steps to the college recruiting process from a coach's perspective that we want to go through. And generally, coaches, they follow specific steps through, their recruiting process. So now that you guys have a little bit better idea of what they're looking for, let's kind of dive into these 5 steps that we've listed out here, Kyle. The first thing that really college coaches are doing, and really kind of how they start their process, is first and foremost, they have to get a list together of prospective athletes for that recruiting class. So why don't you touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to short side themselves. There are literally hundreds of thousands of student athletes out there for probably pretty much every respective sport. Football, for example, has over 1 million high school student athletes in just the U.S. alone. So there's a lot of different tools that they use. The third-party recruiting services like NCSA, we have the largest network of student athletes in the world where coaches can come find prospects. The old adage was that if you're good enough, if you're smart enough, coaches will find you, or maybe that your high school coach or your club or travel coach would help you get that opportunity. That does still happen to an extent, but again, with the amount of student athletes that are out there, it's difficult for a college coach to rely solely on recommendations from high school and club coaches. If a coach recommends a player to a college coach, first thing they're probably going to ask for is, can you send me some video? What do their grades look like? They're going to ask for more information, which is typically found on the NCSA profile. From there, it's a lot on sending out questionnaires to student athletes to get their information. We talk a ton about student athletes being the ones who are initiating contact with emails, with phone calls, with social media. That's a huge way. That's our biggest way of recommending for student athletes to get on prospect lists. And lastly, camps, showcases, they do play a role. I would say that a lot of that coaches, they know who they're going to be looking at beforehand, but they may do some identifying of prospects at camps, showcases as well. It's a little bit of both, but a lot of times they're going to be going off of who they know already when it comes to those big events where there are hundreds, maybe thousands of players there. So they know who they're going to watch beforehand, but they're using all of their resources to really put together their best roster every single year.
Yeah, and they put a list together, right? So they're not just putting a list saying, hey, I need a shortstop. I'm going to have 2 shortstops on my list. Their list is going to consist of 40, 50, 60, 70 kids in some cases. So these coaches are building these lists based on the prospects, based on some of the stuff that Kyle talked about. And then really step 2 for a college coach then is I need to show that this student athlete that I'm interested in learning more about them. So that's where college coaches can send out, again, letters, questionnaires, camp invites, just generic information, again, from the Division I and Division II schools, because they cannot send specific emails or specific letters or text messages or whatever to a prospective student athlete, again, until kind of that summer between sophomore and junior year. But if I'm a college coach and I have this list of recruits that I've already identified, if they're freshmen and sophomores, I'm sending this information out to them to make them aware that I am interested in them as a prospective recruit. You do have to be careful with the camp invites, I will say, because sometimes coaches will send those out really more as a moneymaker for the program, where they'll get a list of rosters from a tournament or from an event and just send that out there. So the camp invites can be a little bit tricky if it's generic, because again, some coaches will just blast that out to thousands of kids to try to kind of treat it as almost a fundraiser for their program. But that's really kind of the second step. The coach sends out a letter, they send out a questionnaire, they send out a camp invite, to let them know, the student athletes know, that there's someone that's on their list. So again, if you're a student athlete and you're receiving this in the mail, that's a good sign. That means you're on someone's list as a prospective recruit. And then what you do as a student athlete can really be impactful. Don't just get that letter, get that questionnaire, get the camp invite, throw it away, or leave it in an envelope in a box somewhere. If you can respond to that coach, if that's a school that you might be interested in, that's what's going to keep you on their list, right? If I'm a coach and I'm sending out hundreds, sometimes thousands of these to student athletes, and half the people are getting back to me and half aren't, who am I going to pay more attention to as a college coach? Probably the student athletes who have made a step to respond to me or to show a level of interest in my program as well. So again, they identify the recruits and they start to send out generic information to those student athletes. Then Kyle, the next piece is maybe the most important, is beginning to evaluate the athletes. All right, I got this list. I got 20 catchers that I've got on my list. Let me evaluate them to see who do I really want number one. So talk a little bit more about that evaluation process for college coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, in the college recruiting process, coaches, they've identified their prospects, like David said. Let's say they maybe have 100 prospects they're looking at for their 2025 class. Now they need to evaluate those prospects and kind of rank them in their order of who they like the most and who they think they actually can bring into the program. So they're going to be doing that, through video on their NCSA profiles. They're going to be going out to watch student athletes in person at showcases and at tournaments. They're going to be going to their high school club coaches for recommendations as well. I used to coach travel softball, and coaches would ask us about the players on our team. It's going to be a lot about just trying to watch these student athletes and evaluate them in their natural setting, evaluate them during games and see what they look like when they're doing well, see what they look like when they're not doing well. How do they respond to adversity? How do they take the field? How do they treat their coach? How do they talk to their parents? They're watching them, come into the park from the parking lot. Is their dad carrying their bag? Whatever it may be. So they're evaluating all these different aspects, and it takes time. They can't just get a feel for a student athlete by going out and watching them once, and now they know the entire story on a student athlete. That's another place where camps come into play, is if they've already identified prospects they like, they know they want to see them, they have interest in them. Maybe they bring them to a camp or invite them to a camp, get them on campus, and their current players interact with those potential prospects and see what they're like. Is it someone that we would get along with? Are they going to fit in with this program? It's a long process that can take a lot of time, seeing them in various different venues and how they play, which is going to be a lot different than just seeing their video. On top of that, we have social media, which I know nothing about social media. It's complete mystery to me, but it's a way for coaches to still see more video. It's a way for prospects to initiate contact and get on coaches' radars and let them know of their interest as well. So there are various different forms, but it's a long process of determining, this student I've identified, are they going to be someone that A, I can get to come to my program, and B, are they going to be a good fit with my program once they get here?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. I think the evaluation goes beyond just what they can do within, the chalk lines or within the court, whatever the case is. That evaluation goes beyond, even looking at their social media. What are kids posting on social media? Are they posting negative things or showing maybe a negative reflection of their character or something like that? So again, the evaluation process is a a very in-depth process that goes beyond just looking at someone's film. It's getting to know them. It's when those dates are hitting that the coach can start directly contacting the student athlete, building a relationship with them, getting to know them. Is this student athlete going to be a good fit for our program, like Kyle talked about? And is our program going to be a good fit for what they're looking for as well? So again, this college coaches begin the identification process by building a list of potential recruits. They then start to reach out to those recruits with generic information to let them know they're on the prospect list. They then begin to evaluate the athletes that they're really starting to be seriously looking at. And then once those contact dates hit, they can start directly reaching out to those student athletes. Again, emails, text messages, phone calls. Again, begin that communication, begin that relationship. And then Kyle, once that relationship hits, that's when we kind of get into step 4 here and what college coaches are doing. And that's when things start to get more serious. So again, once you've been evaluated, you've kind of been put on that list, you begin to kind of have that communication and develop a relationship with that coach. Then it's upon the coach to figure out, I have 3 scholarships available of the thousands of kids I've identified as recruits, of the hundreds of kids I've maybe evaluated, of the maybe 50 kids I've been talking to on the phone or via email. Who am I going to extend an offer to? Who am I going to offer a scholarship to? That's kind of the next step in that process.
Yeah, and that can really occur at any time when it comes to verbal offers, verbal scholarship offers for most sports. Verbal offers start happening, earlier in the recruiting process, especially sports where they can have a little bit more conversation when student athletes are proactively connecting with the college coaches. So we can look at a sport like football where there are hundreds of freshmen who just finished up their first year of high school who've already gotten scholarship offers, verbal offers from those coaches. Football's notorious for college coaches offering out scholarships to a lot of student athletes. Other sports are not going to be so much because they don't have the same amount of scholarships to play with. So a sport like baseball or softball, baseball only has 11.7 scholarships. They have to use those sparingly. They have to make sure that this student athlete is going to be the one that they want to offer a scholarship for. So it's a long vetting process to determine, hey, this is someone that I'm going to offer a scholarship to, which leads up to signing. We'll talk about here in a second. So these verbal offers, we get asked all the time, are they binding? Is it a binding agreement? And no, they're really not. But at the same time, you can't get a verbal offer if you haven't been identified, if you haven't been evaluated. And if you're someone who's gotten a verbal offer, that puts you way ahead of a lot of other people. So getting to that point is huge, and knowing that that's something that's out there and that's something you can leverage toward other opportunities. If this is a school that you're not quite sure about, you want to look towards some other opportunities, that's a place where you can use this verbal offer to leverage toward maybe more scholarship money at another program. So there are some drawbacks with the verbal offers where student athletes, coaches, they can back out. A lot of times we see that more on the student athlete side of things than on the college coach side of things. So there's a little bit of danger to it. You want to make sure that you're in constant contact with that coach if you get a verbal offer and you agree to a verbal offer. But what we talk about is that's a handshake agreement that, hey, this is my offer and I'm going to come play at your school. This is generality. We talk about that being, the non-formal end of the recruiting process for you until signing period.
Yeah, I think what's important too, we can keep the 2 box up here, Jim. I think what's important too is if I'm a college coach and I've got, 10 catchers that I'm recruiting that are on my kind of final list here, I'm offering a couple of those guys. I'm not just offering one and then waiting to see what happens. I'm offering a few of those guys. So I may offer the top 5 of my top 10 on my list. And if the third guy says, yes, I'm accepting your offer, those other offers may go away because I have a limited amount of scholarships. So it's not just getting that offer. It's also understanding how many other kids is that coach offered in your position, because that could impact your offer and really the standing of it or how long it'll last.
100%. Yeah, it's all built on that relationship that you have with the coach. I mean, again, a lot of people think that, it just kind of works itself out senior year that you get that offer from the coach, you accept, hurrah, here we go. But no, it's very much a business-like process where you maybe as a student athlete be having multiple conversations with that coach and trying to get a better feel for where they're at. How many other student athletes in my position are you looking at for this class? Where do I rank among those other student athletes you're looking at to bring in to your program next year? And they may be honest with you and tell you, oh, we're looking at 7 and you're number 3, like David said. So we're going to offer these other student athletes before you. So that's where it really comes into play, where you need to have options. You need to be diversified. Unlike my portfolio, you need to have it spread out to a lot of different places. That way you can get the most out of your situation and you don't get, end up in between a rock and a hard place because you're focused on just one school and one program, and now they're going a different direction than you.
Yeah, especially this day and age too, with the amount of college coaching changes you see. That offer may be given to you as a junior, and then between your junior and senior year, that coach leaves and goes somewhere else, and suddenly you don't have that offer anymore, right? So there's a lot of variables in little things and nuances of the recruiting process too that can affect things. Cool. So again, you get identified. Coaches are identifying kids. They start to send out the information. They begin to evaluate them. They start to have the conversations, get the offers, get the scholarships out. And then once the student athletes accept the offer, accept that scholarship, Kyle, again, that can happen at any point, sophomore, junior year, freshman year, even in some cases. And then senior year comes, and that's kind of the victory lap where the student athletes are signing their letter of intent, putting pen to paper, making that verbal offer official, and kind of getting the monkey off your back in terms of the stress of the recruiting process.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a ton of stress. And signing that letter of intent, I don't know about for anybody else, but for me, it was a giant weight off my shoulders. I couldn't wait to finish it up. It was a hard decision for me. I was having a lot of difficult conversations with coaches, and it was not a lot of fun. So being able to finish that, because the signing process or signing period starts in the fall of senior year for most sports. Football starts a little bit later. But being able to sign that and enjoy the rest of your senior year is a huge bonus. It's a huge win to use your senior year as a victory lap and know that you don't have to work on recruiting anymore. Your offer's there, your letter of intent's there. Everything's pre-wrapped up for you. Versus now in my senior year, I'm just now starting this recruiting process. I thought coaches were going to find me. I thought things were just going to work out. They didn't. Now I'm scrambling in my senior year to see what other opportunities are out there, see if there are any options, see what schools are still looking for my class. Or is there any more scholarship money left? You don't want your senior year to be filled with stress trying to figure out where you're going to go play next year, if you're even going to be able to play your sport in college the next year. So again, that's why we emphasize taking all these steps very early on in the process and making it a long drawn out process versus cramming it into your senior year.
Yeah, even for some seniors that sign the letter of intent, again, maybe that coach leaves during the year and you want to reopen your kind of, decision and revisit things. So, and there's a lot of little things that can happen throughout the process, but I think hopefully that gives you guys a good understanding as to the process of what coach is going through. Again, identifying which potential recruits are out there, letting the student athletes know that they've been identified, beginning to then evaluate the student athletes further, beginning that relationship, starting to talk to the coach, student athletes, get to know them better, starting to extend the offers, offer the scholarships, and then again, getting the student athletes to sign there. So there's a reason it's called the recruiting process. There's a long list of steps that are involved with that. And again, if you guys have any questions about where you're at in the process, where your student athlete is, reach out to us. This is what we do, is help educate families and make sure that you guys are doing things the right way here. So we do got some questions coming in, Kyle. So let's get to a couple of these. I'm going to take this one. This one's from Lori regarding the transfer portal. So Lori wants us to explain the portal. Every athlete is truly on a year deal. So do they have to do anything special to enter the portal, any drawbacks, et cetera? So just to explain a little bit more, the transfer portal is really, I'd say, most popular in football and basketball. Certainly women's volleyball, it's becoming more popular as well. But if a student athlete is at a scholarship, if they're at a program and they decide to transfer, they want to transfer or pursue other transfer options, they have to enter their name into the transfer portal, which is run ultimately by the NCAA. So to answer your question, Lori, potential drawbacks could be a lot of times you have to kind of make that decision. If you announce that you want to transfer, sometimes that coach that the program that you're at may say, okay, if you're announcing that you're transferring and you're entering the portal, we're going to look for a replacement for you. So you kind of have to come down to that decision first and foremost, like, yes, I want to transfer. I want to see what other options are out there. You will have student athletes enter the portal, pull their name out of the portal, and return to the school. So again, that kind of depends on the coach or the program there. But the transfer portal, again, it allows you to put your name in a pool ultimately that coaches are able to access to see, all right, this student athlete is at this university but wants to transfer. Maybe we recruited them in the past, or maybe we know someone who played against them or whatever the case is. And then that coach can then pursue that transfer once they're in the portal. Once a student athlete is in the portal, that's when it allows other coaches to contact that student athlete. So if I'm under scholarship and I don't enter the transfer portal, it would be considered, ultimately poaching me if a college coach came to me and wanted to try to recruit me away from that program and I'm not in the transfer portal. The transfer portal is blown up again with COVID. The NCAA has lessened some of the rules and restrictions about having to sit out a year or two. which was part of the transfer portal in the past. So kids are able to transfer and play right away at their new school and not have to sit a year out. Transfer portal is becoming, again, more and more popular, but it's throwing a wrench in the recruiting process for coaches, for student athletes, especially for student athletes coming out of high school, like we talked about as well. So great question there. Kyle, I'm going to turn to you for this one. This one probably is right up your alley from Jill. Multi-sport athletes. So she's got a freshman son who plays baseball, football, basketball. Baseball is his focus. But other seasons he's occupied with other sports. In order to get him seen and marketed, does he need to pare down to just baseball, or is it okay to be a multi-sport athlete? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, great question, Jill. I dealt with a lot of the same myself. I was similar to your son. I played baseball, golf, and basketball, and hockey in high school. I ended up quitting hockey after my freshman year, but was still playing all those other sports. And yeah, it definitely negatively impacted my recruiting. That being said, I didn't know anything about recruiting in high school. I was in that boat that just thought, hey, I'm good. Coaches will probably find me. Turns out that's not the case, though I did fortunately end up getting found. When it comes down to it, I don't think your son has to quit those other sports. I think it's actually good. I think it gives you as a high schooler a good break from just playing baseball year round. I know that would have burnt me out. I would have gotten tired as a high schooler of just playing baseball 365. I like being able to play golf in the fall, though I was playing baseball in the fall as well. I like being able to play basketball in the winter and just do baseball training to stay in shape. I think it's good cross training, makes you a better all-around athlete. What it means for you from a recruiting standpoint is that I don't think you need to pare those things down to focus on baseball. You just need to double down on how much you're doing from a recruiting standpoint. It just means you need to do that much more when it comes to building up your profile, having updated video, being proactive with updating coaches where you're at and sending them emails and being able to see where they're at in the recruiting process and making sure that when he's playing in the spring and probably more likely when he's playing in the summer, that he's going to showcases or going to tournaments or whatever it may be, and not going out there just hoping that coaches happen to show up. They happen to be at his field. They happen to see him playing. He happens to do well. But doing your due diligence beforehand to build up the profile, get video on there, get those coaches to come watch him play, drive that attention from coaches that make sense, that are going to be a good fit for him where he can play and they're going to be interested, and trying to build that relationship, get that evaluation and build those relationships with coaches to make sure he has opportunities. So personally, I would say play all the sports you can because it's fun. You don't get another opportunity to do it again until you're David and my age, and all you can do is play golf, and golf's a stupid game. And it just makes you hate yourself. So enjoy it while you can, but just double down on what you're doing proactively in recruiting.
It makes me hate golf even more is watching you hit 350-yard drives.
It makes me hate it seeing those 350-yard drives go 350 yards right and left.
Or turn into a triple bogey.
Oh, yeah, easily every hole.
All right. We got a couple questions here about the age student athlete should start from Jen and Gavin. So we're going to double up on these. But ultimately, as a student athlete, you can initiate contact with the college coach really at any point in the recruiting process. So as a freshman in high school, you can email any coach in the country that you wanted to. That's really one of the benefits of starting the process early. Now, again, if I'm a 5'4", 110-pound point guard who hasn't played a lick of varsity or a lick of travel basketball, do I want to be emailing Division I basketball coaches? Probably not. So there is a timing aspect to it based on your student athlete as to when they're ready to maybe start getting on coaches' radars. Some kids are ready to be seen 8th grade freshman year. They're playing at a really high level, and coaches are going to want to evaluate or identify you and begin to kind of keep an eye on your progression. Other kids maybe aren't ready till sophomore year to start doing that. But earlier, the better. And again, as a student athlete, there's no restriction on when you can email a college coach. And the earlier you can do that, oftentimes the better it's going to be. So again, earlier the better. And Jen, to answer your question, the best place to promote an athlete, next college student athlete. If you don't have a recruiting profile with our network, again, it's the largest network in the country. We've been around for 20 plus years. There's the website there as well. You can build a recruiting profile in our network and reach out to us. We'll begin to talk with you through the process. But again, having an online presence nowadays, especially with everything that's happened with COVID and recruiting budgets, it's critical to have an online presence. And again, we're biased, but we feel that we do it better than anyone else. So a couple more questions here, Kyle. We have 2 more, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. We're hitting the half-hour mark, which is great. Melissa wants to know, what do you do if you have a child that plays basketball, but the school does not push anything or the school does not get seen by college coaches. So this can really, I think, relate to any sport. If you're at a school that maybe isn't getting help from coaches, it's not maybe a school that's a winning program. What do you do to get yourself seen? Again, I'm going to do this real quick. But Kyle, go ahead.
Do I need to answer? Well, I was going to say, the way the question started off, Melissa, I was going to say, disown your son, but no, it went a different direction than I was, thought I was going to be. But I mean, just one thing to acknowledge is that you're in the norm. It's not unusual. You're very much in the scenario that 95% of student athletes are in for every sport across the country. There are something like 10,000 high schools across the country, and it's just not really a main focus for most high schools, for most guidance counselors, for even coaches to promote student athletes to get recruited. Their main goal is just get you through the school and get you graduated and get you onto college in general. So it kind of falls on you. At the end of the day, your high school, your guidance counselor, your high school coach, none of them are going to be the ones who are paying for your student athlete's college. So it's up to you guys to be the ones who are proactively making these things happen for them. Again, NCSA, like David talked about, that's what we do. That's what we talk to families about, is how you guys can do that on your own, but also how we can help out with that process.
All right, I lied. We're going to take 2 more questions because the last one involves my wardrobe. So we're going to take that one for sure. I'll get this one. Nat, Twitter page seems very important for these student athletes trying to get their names out there to receive offers. Twitter can be a help in the recruiting process. Don't rely solely on a student athlete's Twitter page to get you recruited. Again, college coaches aren't just randomly searching Twitter looking for recruits. If they've identified you as a recruit, if they begin to maybe evaluate you, then they're going to look on your Twitter page. Very similar to people who post their videos on YouTube. Again, college coaches aren't just scrolling through YouTube hoping to find kids, but there are sirens going off in the background, which is awesome. So I'm sure you guys can hear that. But again, Twitter can be helpful in recruiting, but don't rely on that solely to be the way to get your student athlete recruited. The last question, which is a great one. So Katie saw my IMG hat. Her son is a football player there and a multi-sport athlete. Is there a true benefit to attending those specialty camps regarding exposure? Please tell us more. First of all, NCSA and IMG Academy are partners, so that's why we're wearing a lot of the IMG stuff as well. But Kyle, the benefit of these exposure camps, these specialty camps, again, IMG is probably one of the best to ever do it and currently do it. But the exposure camps, the specialty camps, what's the benefit for these for college recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've talked about with any camps, when it comes to exposure, IMG, incredibly reputable name. So absolutely, it's going to be great experience for your son as a student athlete. You're probably going to be able to get some exposure. Again, just like any other camp that we would talk about, I wouldn't go into that camp cold, just hoping that coaches are going to happen to find my son. Can't emphasize that enough for any sport, for any camp, any showcase, any tournament. Don't go in just hoping that your student athlete's going to be found, because it's not likely these days. Does happen, not likely. The other advantage, IMG, everybody knows them for their training, their equipment, their setup. They have an incredible facility. So as far as like skill camps go and specializing, if you're going to go to one, again, we're going to be biased, but I would pick the IMG one, just knowing how many great athletes coming out of that program. They're specializing in training and the way they teach and train. You're going to get a great experience. Your son's going to come out of there better, stronger, more know-how. It's going to be a great experience for him overall. So absolutely, it definitely can be helpful.
Cool. A lot of great questions. We appreciate them as always. Makes them more interesting on our end as well, especially when my wardrobe's commented on. So cool. But as we do before we wrap things up, we're going to honor some of our recent NCSA commits, so student athletes in our network that have had a profile run in and made their college decision. So Kyle, we'll start with you.
Awesome. So our first recruit today is Dakota Berryhill. Dakota is a track and field athlete, jumper, pole vaulter, had a lot of success, was looking at a lot of different schools, got almost 100 views from different schools across the country, some Division I programs. Then there ended up going to Union College, who in Kentucky, you actually end up viewing his profile 10 different times, and they're following him as well. So coming out of Alabama, headed up to Kentucky. Ton of success within the recruiting process, had 31 emails opened by college coaches and was seen and found directly through his NCSA profile. So great success to him. Congrats to you, Dakota.
What a serious looking young man.
Serious looking young man. Don't mess with him. He's a serious customer.
That's normal face, right?
That is normal face right there. Learn that, and maintain it.
All right, next up, we go to the field hockey world. London Babout, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. London's actually a 2023 prospect, so she's a junior in high school right now. Her family got signed up with us. People have been asking about when to start the process. They signed up with us during London's early in her sophomore year. She's already made a verbal commitment to a Division III school, Salisbury University, which is in Maryland. Kyle, do you know the nickname for Salisbury?
The Stakes.
Oh my God, I was so happy that you said that. I was hoping that was going to be your answer. That's
gosh, we're just like two peas in the pod.
That is such a dad joke and so great. And if you didn't say it, I was going to. It's the Seagulls, though. The Seagulls. The Stakes is
It's the Seagull Stakes.
The Stakes is a great option as well. But London's a junior in high school and has already made that college decision. So a Division III program there in Salisbury University. So making an early commitment, again, found an opportunity for a program that's a high-level Division III school and athletic program, and will be making her way from Delaware to Maryland for her college experience. Kyle, wrap us up.
Awesome. Last one for this week is Madeline Caro. She goes by Maddie. She's headed to LaSalle University. She started with us in November of 2019, so been working with us for quite some time. Very proactive in her profile, over 200 views, 326 different emails opened by college coaches, including where she's headed to a Division III program in Newton, Massachusetts. 7 views from LaSalle, 2 for 2, an email she sent to them that they opened. So again, another student athlete that was very proactive, managed her own recruiting process, and was able to be successful and find a place where she's going to be competing, going all the way from California out to Massachusetts. So congrats to you, Maddie.
Well, Kyle, do you know LaSalle University's rival school?
LaBaye University.
That's 2 for 2, and we did not plan those. That is
plan. I mean, we just get each other.
I'm just so happy. I was so happy. I thought of that one on the fly too. So
very nice.
You can tell
I love us.
We've been doing NCSA Live for like 5-6 years now, and we've got our shtick down. So that's awesome. But again, a lot of great information on today's show. Again, any questions you all have, whether it's about your student athlete or anything specific to getting a profile started and more about our network, reach out to us. Again, our website, ncsasports.org, has a ton of great information, breaking down sports division level a little bit more in depth when it comes to the identification process and really what college coaches are going for. But it's such an important piece to it. And again, it's not just an overnight thing that happens. It's a long process for student athletes and for college coaches as well. So it's a once in a lifetime thing that student athletes can go through with the recruiting process. So hopefully this gives you some tips and some words of wisdom to do things the right way. But Kyle, again, appreciate you and your ability to pick up on my cheesy humor.
Appreciate you. We'll play in Peoria.
Sounds good. Well, everyone have a great week. I think Philip and Christy are here next week again, 2 p.m. Tuesday every week on CSA Live. Join us, have some laughs, ask some questions, hopefully learn a little bit as well. But for Kyle Winters, I'm David Kamisek. Have a great rest of your week.